I want to thank you all for participating with such vigor and enthusiasm this morning. You guys did a great job. We've got a fantastic luncheon speaker for you. We're very honored to have a very special keynote for today's luncheon. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. Secretary Nielsen was born in Colorado Springs and, like me, is a graduate of the University of Virginia Law School. She's the third DHS secretary that I've worked with, and far and away, more than her predecessors, she gets it. She understands the importance that elections play. She understands the importance of local and state election officials in this process. I've been incredibly impressed by her understanding and support that she has provided to states and counties. She frequently says that election security is national security, and she's made clear her commitment to safeguard elections. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen.
So since I'm not nearly as tall as Wayne, see if we can not break it. Well, it's my pleasure to be back in Colorado. As Wayne said, my parents, he said I was born here. My parents were in the military, and so I had the pleasure and distinct honor of being born in Colorado Springs. Then we, soon after that, moved to Florida, which is the exact opposite sort of landscape, but we came back every year, and I was thanking him for the weather, and he was saying it's always like that here, which I know is true. So it's lovely to be here. I want to thank you all for the invitation. I want to thank you for exercising. Exercising, I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but exercising is so important. It's such a core component of what we do to prepare, both as communities, as individuals, and then certainly between levels of government and the private sector. So thank you for that. I also want to thank the election officials who are here from across Colorado. And I understand we even have some here from New Mexico and New Jersey. Thank you for making the journey. I also always want to thank DHS folks who are here and participating. So I want to thank the CS&C exercise team and our regional director for partnering so well with our good friends in Colorado. So thank you to you all. So our Constitution vests an incredible responsibility in you, and you know this. Administering the complex machinery of our democracy is the heart of what makes us the country that we are. You're the guardians of these critical systems, and I want to thank you for the hard work that you do year-round to ensure that on Election Day, we're ready. And that's from all kinds of threats. Cyber is the one we're talking about now, but you know better than anyone all of the different things that can go wrong, and the different ways that you have to monitor, and the different ways that you have to have rules and protocols and signage and make sure that all the elections go off without a hitch. Right now, the general election by my count is about 62 days away. I know that military and overseas ballots are going out soon, and we're all readying ourselves for early voting. We obviously, in many, many states, have already gone through primary season. No doubt this election is being closely watched by technical experts and average citizens alike, not just because of the candidates or the politics of it all, but because election security has emerged as a top concern for the American people, and I can tell you that's true of all of our allies. I just got back from Australia, where I met with my Five Eyes colleagues, and they're very much concerned for their elections as well. Now, their main adversary, if you will, is China, in the case of what they worry about in elections, where we're much more worried about Russia. But they're seeing very similar things to what we're seeing, and they're also very worried about their democracies and protecting their elections. Following the 2016 elections, the security of our election infrastructure was thrust into the spotlight, as we all know. And once it became clear that Russian actors attempted to target our elections, America wanted action, and rightly so. There was a lot of confusion about what happened, with many unfortunately trying to publicize and politicize the issue for other reasons. Mischaracterized, misunderstood, and some blatantly false information was floating around. But the fact is, and this bears repeating, no votes were altered. But what also bears repeating is what Wayne said, which I very much do believe that election security is national security, and there really is nothing more important to ensure the future of our democracy. So what we did see, although no votes were changed, we saw without question that Russian government cyber actors were actively seeking vulnerabilities and access to our election infrastructure. We assume, as you know, and we've discussed this as partners, that Russia's campaign probably targeted all 50 states, but in almost all cases, there was only preparatory activity, such as scanning basic research. That was really the level of what we observed. In an exceptionally small number of cases, actors were in fact able to access our systems. But as I have said, any attempt to interfere in our election, successful or unsuccessful, is a direct attack on our democracy and is unacceptable. We learned a lot of valuable lessons in 2016, and I think you would agree we're miles from where we were. I think that's important to continue to collectively message to our citizens so that they do have confidence that we have taken this seriously and that we continue to act. Collectively, we've spent thousands of hours working to reduce risks and remediate vulnerabilities in our election infrastructure. Colorado was a key participant in Tabletop the Vote 2018. I thank you for that. I had the opportunity to speak to participants on the last day of that election. And it included 44 states at the end, the District of Columbia, and representatives from a number of federal agencies, including our colleagues at the Department of Defense. Because whenever there's going to be a really, really bad day, I always want to make sure that I've coordinated ahead of time with our colleagues for support to civilian agencies. And I actually, just before this, was at Northcom discussing that and other issues with General O'Shaughnessy. So we spent 3 days of this exercise working through scenarios, and really the goal was just one. We wanted to know how we could better support you, what's working in what we've planned so far, and what do we need to do additionally before the next election, and then the next election, and the next election. So today we have the opportunity to work together again to drive our security posture forward. This is an opportunity to identify ways to improve our collective ability to identify and respond to cyber incidents, to protect voter confidence in the integrity of our elections. That's kind of the bottom line. The progress we've made is real, but we have to do more, and I don't think any of us would say we're in the clear. We have not seen any attempt at the moment, and as you know, we'll continue to update you real time if anything should change, but we have not seen any attempt to date that matches the scale of what we saw in 2016. But we do know the threats remain against our election system. We know they're real and evolving, and we certainly know the adversary is willing and capable. So as I've reiterated time and time again, to optimize our ability to support election security efforts, we have sought to strengthen our partnership with you. You are on the front lines. You know how your systems work. There's not one size fits all. What works in one part of Colorado may or may not work in one part of Florida. So we have to really work with you individually in some cases to tailor the tools that we offer, to tailor the information, and then to, in turn, tailor how we receive that information from you. The election system's processes and procedures, as they do very greatly, we do have some things in common. We do have basic systems that need updating. We do have basic needs to ensure the integrity, which includes making sure that that vote is counted and is counted correctly. So we look to you to be the experts and to tell us what else you need, which is why you're in charge, because you do know best what is best for your communities. So I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to do it. I just want to reiterate that we are here to help you and support you in your efforts. And I do really mean that I ask you to tell us how to do that best, because I think that's the only way it'll be effective. We do offer a number of services. I usually take the handbook with me. You all have seen it. You can flip through it. There's, very bottom layer ones such as information sharing, moving all the way up to joining the EI-ISAC. There's hygiene scans. There's more in-depth vulnerability assessments that we're happy to help with, incident response playbooks, partnerships, et cetera, you name it. But if there's something missing, let us know, and we'll add it. Whenever we work with you, we also gain additional insights into our adversaries. We get a lot of threat information. Most of the time, it's quite vague. So the only way we can really put those pieces together and connect the dots is to understand what you're seeing in your operational environments. And that then gives us the context and perspective to then tell you what we're seeing in terms of those potential threat indicators and attacks headed your way. So we've been working a couple different things, as you know. One of them is security clearances. As I said earlier today in a different group, have really pushed DHS, but pushed our federal partners to make sure that we have processes in place for those day-in read-ins. I don't ever want it to be the case that we had actionable information and we didn't share because someone's clearance hadn't come through. So I commit to you that if we have something to share, we will find a way to share it with you, but we do want to continue to work with you on the clearances. The benefit of a clearance is you can more continually, periodically have those conversations with us in a classified setting. And that does help build relationships. It also helps to get us know your systems better, and it helps you understand us better. So we want to do both at the same time. And we've also obviously all worked together to set up the EI ISAC. I've been amazed. I've been at DHS or part of DHS or part of the community since its inception. This is the fastest growing ISAC we have ever seen. And that is of tremendous accommodation to you and everyone in this room who has joined or who's helped us step it up. It's a very important effort. It's got to be machine speed to be able to share information, but that's just the baseline. At this point, I don't think it's much more than a nice to have. It's a need to have, and we need to go from there. So we'll continue to prioritize the tailored information, the same model that we use for other sectors, but tailored to what you need in yours. And thanks to the partnership, we've quadrupled our awareness into election infrastructure via the Albert monitoring system. So I think you all know this stat, but I like saying it, so I'll say it again. By the midterm elections this year, more than 90% of registered voters will live in an area where Albert sensors are deployed on their election infrastructure. That's tremendous. I'm very proud of that accomplishment that we have accomplished together. Many of you have taken advantage of the full range of services that we offer. And for those of you who've not, they remain available to you. I encourage you to take a look, check them out, see if they might be of use to you. Some of you have tremendous organic capabilities. Some of you work with third-party vendors. Again, there's no one-size-fits-all here, but just make yourself aware of what we offer in case it could be of use. So last month, in order to ensure this long-term resilience, it's kind of where do we go next? We've done a lot, as I said, since 2016, but about a month ago, I did ask all states to deploy verifiable and auditable ballots by 2020. I think this is important because no matter what happens, we want to be able to ensure our citizens that their vote was counted and counted correctly. So my biggest concern going into this election is more about the possibility of news that is not accurate, right? Or somebody else reporting voting election results that are not accurate. Or someone calling into question the security of a system, thereby calling into question our entire system. So I think making sure that we have something that can audit, something we can go back, something that we can show as redundant to demonstrate that there is integrity is very important. So hoping that we can all get there by 2020. But your state, Colorado, for those of you, most of you here from Colorado, your entire state, as you know, has auditable records for all votes. And we greatly applaud that, appreciate that. If you don't mind, we'd love to continue to use you as a best case example of what other states can adopt. You're also conducting a first of its kind statewide risk limiting audit. Very much look forward to learn lessons from that. But this is the kind of audit that I was talking about. It really leaves those leaving the polls with the confidence that this worked, that the democracy worked, and that they had a voice and their voice was heard. So I want to close by thanking you all once again. Colorado is one of our most engaged and dedicated partners. I don't think that's because I was born here, but I'm going to try to take credit with you to really appreciate the partnership. I want to assure you that we are here and will remain here right with you. We'll bring everything we have to bear on the federal side to support you. And if you have any questions about the services we offer or how we could be more of assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to our election task force led by Matt Masterson, who is somewhere in here. I know most of you know, but please don't hesitate to reach out. I also want to encourage everyone to report any suspicious or malicious activity to us. We say say something, and sometimes it becomes trite, but this is an area where you are on the front lines, and no piece of information is too small because it could connect to another piece of information in another state and could give us a better idea of what the threat picture is. So please report early and often. If it proves to be nothing, we'll all be happier for it, but I'd rather that be the case than not having that connectivity. So thank you again for the important work you do every day. And as long as I'm here, standing here, I also want to say it's September, which means it's National Preparedness Month. If I can give a brief public service announcement as well, take this opportunity to make sure that your communities are prepared for all kinds of events. We have lots of resources on ready.gov. But we really are seeking at DHS to build a culture of preparedness throughout our societies so that everyday citizens can add to the preparedness that the government at all levels can bring. So take the opportunity September, talk to your neighbors, your friends, your families about emergency plans, talk to your insurance carriers about what is covered and what's not. You all have had some interesting hail damage lately, I understand. That's one of those ones where it's a bit tricky whether it's covered. Take the opportunity now to find out what's covered before the next storm. So thank you all so much. Thanks for the invite. And I think we're going to do some questions, if I have this right. All right, back to Wayne. Thank you.
So first, thank you very much for being here and for your support. I do want to note that we asked the county clerks to help in the preparation and formulation of questions, so this is where they're coming from. And I would start with a note from them that we appreciate the support and resources of the Department of Homeland Security. I was a county commissioner for a long time. To work together on the very important issue of the security of our elections. Colorado has been proactive, and the county clerks and their association has appreciated hosting the Department of Homeland Security representatives for our last several conferences, and recognize the importance of these much needed funds for state governments that made possible training such as the one this week. With that, let me start, and we've got a few questions here. So if you could have all of the offices of clerk and recorders across Colorado do just one thing to improve overall security in elections, what would it be?
I have to pick just one?
You're the secretary, you've probably got some flexibility, but the question is what?
I guess I would say, if you haven't already, please do join the EI ISAC. I mean, this is going to be the best way in which we can communicate. We have a lot of, as you know, those of you who are already a member, we have a lot of policies, procedures, and protocols that are in place that we just don't have time to design in the middle of a crisis or an event. So it serves a very important steady state function for us to be able to keep you updated and get those threat indicators out to you, and also to receive information off your sensors in conjunction with the MS ISAC. But it's really a great way to build the relationships that we'll all need should there be any reason why we need to communicate during an event. So that would probably be my one thing.
Okay, thank you. What are the top 3 most likely negatively impacting events related to elections for which we should try to prepare?
So, good question again. My first thing I will say, I don't think anyone in this room has an issue with, but I would be concerned if a voter went to vote and, God forbid, for some reason, the voter registration database had been changed and somebody at the local office did not understand the provisional ballot. We have to make sure that citizens know they can ask for one, that it's their right, that it's legally required to be provided, and that we will then determine if, in fact, they were registered correctly to vote. But it's, again, very important to assure them that even if something happens, which I don't think it will in Colorado, there is something they can do, which is show up and still try to vote, get that provisional ballot and vote. I mentioned election night results. I do worry about that because, as we all know, those aren't, in some cases, the final vote tally. We're in an environment and a culture where we want to know things very, very quickly. So that speed puts a lot of pressure on you all to report, a lot of pressure on the news stations to report. I worry a little bit about a disconnect there and making sure, and part of that's not the election infrastructure, to be clear. Part of that is the other half of this, which we're worried about, which is the foreign influence and interference campaign, particularly out of Russia. So just be very mindful to communicate with your constituents as to when and where they should look for the actual results, and to be cautious if they hear results from any other source. Those are probably the top 2. We talked a little bit about backup ballots. That's not an issue here. Crisis comms, we have to have crisis comms. I know many of you have been working that through a variety of ways. Holding statements become very important. I used to consult a bit on crisis communications. It's funny, even a holding statement can be very difficult in the middle of a crisis to draft. But the game of crisis comms is to communicate early and often. You gotta get something out there to let people know that you're on top of it, you're looking into it, and you'll get back to them. So everyone, please work on crisis comms would be the other thing. I'd be worried that we take too long to respond and that vacuum gets filled with more confusion.
Support for information systems and IT generally within local government is challenging as resources are scarce. State systems are useful as they provide the benefit from economies of scale. Does DHS have any plans for direct outreach and resources to county commissioners?
We do, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this takes all of us together. There's no one part of the election system that's more important than another because they all contribute to the ability of Americans to vote. So short answer is absolutely. The longer issue, other than repitching the EI-ISAC, I'd point you to the work we're doing with many of you on the last mile. So some of you I know have already received these posters, some we're working with, but we're working and attempting to work with each county to develop the additional steps that you are taking and will take to secure the infrastructure. That last mile is always the most difficult because depending on what state you're in, you may or may not have access to state funds. You may or may not have infrastructure that's as up to date as you would like. So we are very cognizant of that last mile. We ask folks at all levels to help others. I mean, this has to be all of us working together. We're all one team to ensure the integrity. But those last mile, and I also will say, for those who have already received it, they also have an interesting secondary benefit, which is it gives a roadmap for you to go to your funding authorities, if you will, and clearly make the case as to why you need additional resources, because it marches out a checklist of what you need to do and what you intend to do. And we have been told that's been very helpful in conversations on resourcing.
Election officials are accustomed to political rhetoric from candidates, campaigns, parties, and interest groups during the election cycle. The clerks and election officials serve as the neutral arbiter of the process for all voters and frequently must spend a great deal of time dispelling inaccurate or inflammatory rhetoric that attempt to damage voter confidence. Some of us would say this has become a full-time job. What communication plans does DHS have in place to dispel inaccurate or irresponsible information from whatever quarter, foreign or domestic?
So I would go back a little bit to what I just mentioned on crisis communications. You know, DHS worked with the Belfer Center on cybersecurity playbooks, and you can get those if you don't already have them. In there, we do have some models for crisis communication plans. We also have, for those of you who have worked with us on cyber incident response plans, we always have a component in there that is that crisis comms. We also have basic information on ready.gov, actually, because we all have to deal with crisis comms. The biggest thing that tends to be a gap that I see is thinking through who citizens should call if they're concerned. So I'll make a joke from another sector only because it's top of mind. I mentioned it earlier in a different context. I did an exercise maybe about 6 years ago with a state's water and wastewater utilities. We were at a part of the cyber exercise where things went awry, and the question which always comes up is, who did you call? And the answer very earnestly was, well, we'd call 911. And 911 is not going to be able to respond to that cyber incident. The gap when it comes to election security is telling your citizens who you expect them to call. Where can they find additional information if they're worried, concerned, see something suspicious? Who should they say something to? There's a proliferation of answers to that in many states, but I would recommend that anyone's crisis comms plan begins with how are we communicating with the citizens and how are we giving them comfort of what they can do if they're concerned.
So, last question. In Colorado, we're awfully proud of the recognition we've received as the safest state to cast a vote. The statewide voting system modernization, cybersecurity measures, the RLA are just a few of those things. What comes to mind in terms of long-term planning? What do you think the next frontier is for election preparedness?
Yeah, I think it's the hyperconnectivity. So I think the next trick will be if we get past the audits and we have redundant ballots and/or auditable systems, where will technology take us next? Again, in speaking with some of my international partners, some countries that are lean forward more than we on e-government, for example, have considered allowing their citizens to vote from their phones. The idea there is they're trying to get more and more people to vote. Should we ever consider something like that, for example, that opens a host of benefits and effectiveness efficiencies in terms of our ability to vote, but it obviously opens a whole new battleground of potential cyber vulnerabilities. So I think the next stage is as we continue to think about where we're headed with technology, as you think about upgrading your systems, is at the same time anticipating and thinking through what new vulnerabilities might be introduced into the system. And part of that is the insider threat. We haven't really seen that as much in this particular sector, but I can tell you from other sectors, unfortunately, that is a threat that is on the rise. So making sure we also think through access controls. There's also the physical security of voting machines. We don't talk about that a lot. We don't need to talk about that a lot, particularly with the cyber threat, but it's still an area of vulnerability. So thinking through insider threat, I think, would be another thing moving down the line. But really, it's just where technology takes us. We got to make sure before we make those decisions, we've thought through security at the same time.
Madam Secretary, I know you have an incredibly busy schedule. We're honored that you joined us here in Colorado for this event. Thank you so much for your remarks.
My pleasure. Thank you all, and thank you for everything you're doing. Really, I truly appreciate it. Oh, you got it.